The Netherlands have reached 3 World Cup finals. They've produced some of the greatest players football has ever seen. And yet, they have never won the World Cup. What's even stranger is that this current Dutch team may actually have a better chance than some of the legendary generations that came before it. Not because they're more talented, not because they have bigger stars, but because they're different. And that difference could finally change the story. For decades, Dutch football has felt like one of sport's greatest unfinished chapters. Every generation seemed to bring new hope, a new hero, a new opportunity. And every generation ended the same way. Heartbreak. Imagine legends come and go, watching your country reach the biggest stage in football, only to watch the dream slip away again and again. That's what being a Dutch football fan has felt like for nearly half a century. The pain started in 1974. Led by Johan Cruyff and the revolutionary idea of total football, the Netherlands arrived at the World Cup and changed the sport forever. Many believed they were destined to become champions. Instead, they lost in the final. 4 years later, another opportunity, another defeat. But perhaps the most painful moment came in 2010. An entire nation stood just one match away from history. One victory away from finally lifting the trophy that had escaped them for generations. Then came Andres Iniesta's goal. And just like that, the dream in the stadium was gone. 3 World Cup finals, 3 defeats. For most countries, that would simply be bad luck. For the Netherlands, it became part of their identity. Every Dutch player grows up knowing that history. Every Dutch fan carries it. Every new generation inherits the same question. Can we be the team that finally finishes the story? And that's where this current squad becomes fascinating. Because here's the strange part. The teams that reached those finals were probably more talented than this one. They had bigger stars. Something previous Dutch generations often lacked. Balance. But before we get there, there's one player who perfectly represents this moment. Virgil van Dijk. One of the greatest defenders of his generation. A leader. A symbol of modern Dutch football. And perhaps a player running out of opportunities. For Van Dijk, this may be the final chance to achieve what Cruyff, Van Basten, Bergkamp, Robben, and so many others never could. To bring the World Cup home. And that pressure may be exactly what makes this team so dangerous. If you followed football long enough, you've probably noticed something interesting. Whenever people discuss the favorites to win a major tournament, the same names usually appear. France, Argentina, sometimes Portugal, sometimes Brazil, but rarely the Netherlands. And that may be the biggest advantage this team has, because for the first time in a very long time, the Dutch are entering a World Cup without carrying the weight of being everyone's favorite. There is no endless hype. No claims that this is the greatest Dutch generation ever assembled. No expectations of domination. Instead, there is something far more valuable. Freedom. Freedom to focus on football instead of headlines. Freedom to grow during the tournament. Freedom to surprise people. And that's exactly what makes this team different from many Dutch sides of the past.
Relied on extraordinary talent. This generation relies on something less glamorous.
Look across the squad, and you'll notice something unusual. There may not be a Johan Cruyff. There may not be an Arjen Robben. There may not be a player capable of carrying an entire tournament on his own. But there are very few weaknesses. And in modern tournament football, that matters more than ever. Because World Cups are rarely won by the most exciting team. They're usually won by the most complete one. A team that can attack when necessary, defend under pressure, control possession, survive difficult moments, and above all, avoid making costly mistakes. The Netherlands suddenly check many of those boxes. At the back, they possess something every champion needs: stability. Virgil van Dijk remains one of the world's most respected defenders, not because he makes spectacular tackles every minute, but because he brings calm, organization, qualities that become priceless in knockout football. In front of him, the Dutch midfield may be the most important part of the entire team, because everything flows through one man: Frenkie de Jong. When de Jong is at his best, the Netherlands look completely different. The game slows down, the pressure disappears, passing lanes open. The entire team seems more confident. And that's no coincidence. Great tournament teams usually have one player who controls the rhythm of everything. For Spain, it was Xavi. For Croatia, it was Modric. For the Netherlands, it's Frenkie de Jong. But what makes this squad truly dangerous isn't one player. It's adaptability. They can dominate possession. They can defend deep. They can press aggressively. They can play beautiful football, whatever the situation demands. And that's something previous Dutch teams sometimes struggled with. For decades, Dutch football was famous for playing one way. This team is willing to win in many different ways. Which brings us to the most important question of all. If the Netherlands are this balanced, if they're this organized, if they're this difficult to break down, then why isn't everyone calling them favorites? Because there is one problem, one weakness, one question that could decide whether this story ends in glory or another heartbreak. That weakness begins with a simple question. When everything is on the line, who scores the goal? Every World Cup champion eventually reaches a moment where tactics no longer matter. Possession doesn't matter. Statistics don't matter. All that matters is one chance, one finish, one player willing to decide the game. And that's where doubts about the Netherlands Dutch team is balanced, organized, and difficult to beat. It doesn't possess the kind of striker that terrifies opponents before the match even starts. Think about recent World Cup winners. Argentina had Lionel Messi. France had Kylian Mbappe. Even teams that fell short often had a superstar capable of changing a game in seconds. The Netherlands don't really have that figure. Their goals can come from different players. Their attack can be unpredictable. But in knockout football, unpredictability can sometimes become uncertainty. And uncertainty can be dangerous. Because the difference between lifting the trophy and going home is often measured in moments. A missed chance, a defensive mistake, a penalty shootout, a single touch of the ball. Dutch fans know this better than anyone. They've seen brilliant teams fall because of the smallest details. They've seen dreams disappear in a single night. That's why there is still caution surrounding this team. Not because they're weak, but because football at the highest level is another concern, perhaps an even bigger one: the dependence on Frenkie de Jong. Earlier, we talked about how important he is to this team, but that's exactly the problem. When one player becomes responsible for controlling the rhythm, creating solutions, and connecting every phase of play, the margin for error becomes very small. If de Jong struggles, the Netherlands struggle. If opponents successfully isolate him, the Netherlands become easier to stop. And if injuries become a factor, everything changes. But championship teams need insurance, and that remains one of the biggest questions surrounding this Dutch side. Can they survive if their most important player isn't at his best? Because sooner or later, every contender faces adversity. Every champion faces a crisis. The teams that lift the trophy aren't the ones that avoid problems. They're the ones that solve them. And that's exactly what the Netherlands may have to do if they want to complete their journey. The good news? The path to the trophy is more realistic than many people think. The bad news? It requires almost everything to go right. And that's where this story becomes truly fascinating. If they're this difficult to break down, then why isn't everyone calling them favorites? Because there is one problem, one weakness, one question that could decide whether this story ends in glory or another heartbreak.